Alrighty. Well, I'm gonna probably what I'll do is I'll make some videos sharing some stories that I did share before, because there's a lot of new people here, and you'd have to go way back. You'd have to go back a year or more to see some of these, and rather than have you do searching for stuff and everything. I know some people have inquired about my life, my past, and stuff like that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some videos. Again, I'll tell the stories again. I'm going to make a video now. I've actually cleared a lot of stuff out of my phone, so I have a lot of memory right now. I don't know exactly how much, but more than I usually have. And I'm going to tell a story now about 1980, when when my parents split up, and myself and my youngest sister, Michelle, who was just a toddler at the time, she was only 3 years old in 1980. I was 12, and our mother all ended up in a shelter in Eganville, Ontario. Eganville is up north in Renfrew County, quite a piece north of here anyway, and just a small village. But the closest shelter really was in Carleton Place, which is quite a bit closer to here, but it was full. And these kinds of shelters were a new thing at that time. There weren't very many of them, really. But there was one in Carleton Place, and there was one in Eganville, and they had room in Eganville. So that's where we ended up until some beds opened up in Carleton Place. So we were in Eganville for a couple of months, I would say, in the spring of 1980. This shelter was in an old Grey Nuns convent. And what had happened was the Grey Nuns was a dying order, and so they had the convent in Eganville, they had another convent in Renfrew, and both convents were only partially occupied, because there just weren't enough sisters to fill them both. And it's expensive keeping buildings and stuff. So the Grey Nuns, they decided to close the convent in Eganville and send the sisters from Eganville to Renfrew. And so that opened up the building for other uses. So it became a shelter anyway for women and children and all that. So that's where we ended up. We ended up at an old Grey Nuns convent in Eganville. The convent had been built sometime in the 1800s. It was a stone building, had marble floors and all that. It was quite a fancy old building. It was a nice old building. Had a great big walk-in closet and a medicine cabinet and a sink in every room, in every bedroom, because for the nuns that had been there, Anyway, I had my own room, and my mom and my sister had another room which was just like a door down and across the hall in the back corner of the building. That's going to factor into the story later. But anyway, when we first arrived there, it was a beautiful old building, but I didn't like it. I had a bad feeling about it. I don't know, there was just I guess I sensed something or whatever. I just didn't like it. And I told my mom I didn't like it. She could be kind of harsh anyway, and she said, "Oh, stop talking crazy. It's a nice place. What do you mean you don't like it? Stop talking stupid," basically. And I said, "Well, no, there's just something about the place I don't like." "Well, stop talking stupid. It's a nice place. What do you mean you don't like it? Stop talking. You're talking stupid all the time, So anyway, I decided, like most kids will, I was 12 years old, I'd take my little sister and we'd explore the place. Now, there was a winding back stairwell at the back of the building. We found that, and we went down it, and it kind of went around and around and around, and at the bottom of it, where it opened up across the hall from the boiler room, which was, had the big hot water boilers or whatever to heat the building. That's where it opened up, was right across from that. And there was a hallway. And when you come to the bottom of that stairwell, there was a doorway there. And if you were standing in the doorway, there was a hallway that went past you in either direction. Directly across from that were these big, heavy steel boiler room doors, which were open. And in the boiler room, now my sister was standing behind me, so she didn't see this because she was following me down the stairs. And there wasn't enough room there for us to stand side by side. But anyway, in the boiler room, directly across from where we were, there was this beautiful young girl. She looked to be about my age. She looked to be about 12. Really pretty. Had long flowing blonde hair that just come down, and covered her body like a garment, really. Just flowed down over her body from her head, went right down to her feet. Now, normally, she looked perfectly just like anyone you'd see, and normally I'd have just thought she was some girl that was there or whatever. I wouldn't really have thought anything of it. But what freaked me out was she was hovering a couple of feet off the ground, standing there beside the boiler, and her feet were a couple of feet off the floor. She was standing there, but that's not normal. So anyway, I dragged my sister, just bounced her off all those stairs, dragged her back up there running, and pulling her behind me. So the poor little thing was crying and everything. I got into a lot of trouble for that. My mom wasn't too impressed with me. Our mom wasn't too impressed with me for doing that. Anyway, and our mom was not a believer in anything like that. She didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. So, anyway, a few nights later, my mom puts my sister to bed. And then, my sister was just a toddler, and she goes downstairs or whatever, and she's down there for a while. And then she come up to bed. Well, when she came up to bed, my sister's laying in her bed, and bear in mind she's only 3 years old. She's laying in the bed there, and she says, there was a lady in here. Of course, right away my mom thought it was one of the other residents going in there looking to see if they could steal anything. So she wanted to know who this was, and she says, she said there was. Well, what did she look like? And Michelle says, she was really pretty, and she had long yellow hair. Well, there was nobody there that matched that description at the time. And so, anyway, my mom told my sister basically to shut up and stop talking stupid and go back to sleep. Didn't believe her. Thought it was some story she made up or whatever, Well, the next night, my mom is laying in bed, asleep, and she feels something push on her shoulder. And when she opened her eyes, this beautiful young girl with the long flowing blonde hair was hovering over her bed, looking down at her. And when she opened her eyes and looked up and saw this girl, the girl just smiled, and then she just kind of faded away, And so after that, my mom believed, she knew there was something then. At the time, we hadn't heard the backstory behind this girl, but there was a backstory. We found out about it later. And what it was this girl, in the 1800s, for whatever reason, her father had decided that she wasn't acting right. And her father had brought her to the convent to stay with the nuns to be straightened out. And apparently she didn't want to be there. And she had escaped. And she got caught. She didn't get very far before she got caught. And she got brought back to the convent. And when she got brought back to the convent, they actually locked her in that back corner room upstairs, which is the room that my sister and my mom ended up occupying like 100 years later, you know. And what she had done was she had jumped out the window. And that was pretty high up. That was the 3rd floor of this building. It was this 3-story building. And anyway, she jumped out the window to her death. She died, you know. And so that's the story there anyway. And so there were a few other weird encounters that I experienced and others experienced with her. Everybody that stayed there would see her, and in that room in particular, she was a very strong presence in that room, you know. But that's the story behind the girl anyway, with the long blonde hair in the convent in Eganville, Ontario. That convent apparently has been torn down now. The school was next door, the separate school, Catholic school. It's also torn down now. I went to that school for about 6 weeks, I guess, you know. Long 6 weeks. I didn't like it. It was called St. James the Lesser School. And I used to think, yeah, even the saint it's named after is a lesser saint, you know. What an inferior place. I didn't like it at all. And I'll tell that story in another video later on. I'm going to load this video up now because I'm up now to nearly 12 minutes. I'm going to upload the next video. I'll tell that in the next video, the story of that school. But basically, there was the convent, there was the school next door, and then the church was up on the hill behind the convent, the Catholic church. And of course, I was a Catholic, so I went to the school next door, and I used to go to the Mass up at the church on Saturday nights and stuff. Well, I'll tell you the story about the school. I had kind of a mean teacher. She didn't like people very much, and especially people who were living in that convent, because she didn't think we should have been there. And so I'll tell you all about that anyway in the next video. Bye-bye for now.